Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Lifepoint. If you are visiting with us this morning, we want to welcome you. We're glad that you're here. If you are in need of a Bible, there is one at the end of every aisle. That is our gift to you. Take it home and read it. It's a great thing. Man, those donuts are really popular today, aren't they? We must have got extra jelly-filled donuts. David Grinny, you of all people, come on. Last week, Pastor Andy reminded us that God does some of his greatest work in the silence. Whether it was the example we saw through Job and how everything seemed to be taken away from him, and it seemed like God was absolutely just absent altogether in Job's life, or it's in the gaps that we see from Old and New Testament being 400 years in that silence. That's 146,000 days potentially. We don't know the exact time, but that's a long time to seem quiet. Most important, Pastor Andy showed us that there's hope in the silence. This morning in week 2 of our series, The Silence of God, we're going to talk about when God seems late. When God seems late. There are fewer things in this life that are harder to have than patience, right? That should be a really loud amen. Amen. You know how I know this? I know this because I drive a car in Tucson, right? Listen, you take any holy guy and you put him in a car, tell him to drive across town and back on a schedule, and they'll need some quiet time with Jesus. It's tough. Patience is hard driving for me. I don't know what it is about it. Being late in general leads to a loss of patience. They kind of go hand in hand, late and loss of patience. The truth is, there's so many things in this life that are going to try our patience. And when late leads to loss of patience, it can shift our attitude. And when the attitude comes, it changes us. We become irritable. We become angry. We become oftentimes judgmental because we've lost all of our patience. I want to give you just a quick example of what it looks like when being late leads to a loss of patience. This is called church parking lot road rage.
Jesus, I am late for church. I'm just going to speak this parking spot into existence right now. Just name it and claim it, Jesus. Oh, for heaven's sakes, use the crosswalk. I have the fruit of the Spirit, but y'all need to move. Ooh, she is going to wear that into bounce your eyes. Bounce your eyes. Jesus, give me a miracle. I need a ram in the thicket. I love this church. It's just like come as you are. You know what I'm saying? How do I look, though? Does the jacket go with the shirt? Oh, good Lord. Guests, single parents, expected mother. Who doesn't have a parking spot these days? I have been here 27 years. I deserve respect. Oh yeah, go ahead, take my parking spot. She probably needs Jesus more than me, honestly. Use your mirror. How long does it take to back out of a... Jesus, give me strength. This is so honestly, there better be coffee. There better be coffee. Y'all are gonna make me park in a handicap spot. Oh look, there go the homeschoolers. I swear if somebody took the last jelly donut, I will. Don't make me get out of the... Oh, move.
Hey, are you on the ministry team?
Not today, okay? Oh, you're gonna drive a Lexus? Okay, I know where your treasure's at. Not in heaven. The sermon series is what? Putting others in front of yourself. Oh, this doesn't apply to me. I mean, for heaven's sakes, move out of the road. Look at this truck. Where are you going? A church or a Trump rally? Finally found a parking spot 15 minutes late. Oh, it is way too cold out here, but you better bring a shuttle or I will watch this service online.
Late leads to a loss of patience, which can bring a change in our attitude. So what happens when we assume that God is late in answering our prayers for healing? We assume that God's late in our prayers for salvation in our family members or our friends in our life. Or we assume that God is late in the protection that we prayed over our children. We find ourselves losing patience with God. And we tend to want to rush the results of our requests. Notice that I said when we assume that God is late. Let's start off this morning with this question. Is God late in our lives? Is God late in our lives? I think it's a wonderful thing to ask a question like this because it means that we're actively seeking answers to advance our relationship with God. And we'll be answering this question as we go along. Is God late in our lives? Author David G. Allen says it this way. Patience is the calm acceptance that things can happen in a different way than the one you have in mind. It's the calm acceptance. All too often we think we have a better timeline for God to use or how he should answer our prayers and our needs. We have a better way to do it. When we do this, we create a scenario in which God can become laden. We've created this thing for God to become laden. God is not late. All right, I'm done. I'm just kidding. But wait, there's more. We've created a timeline for God to work in. And when he doesn't complete our request or meet our need in the time that we've allotted to give him, we become impatient. We assume that he is late in his promises. He is late in answering our request or his response towards us. But the reality is that God does not work within the confinements of our mind or our time. Isaiah chapter 55, verses 8 through 9 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Thank God that his thoughts are higher than our thoughts, right? Thank God his ways are beyond our ways. There's always more to the story. This passage gives us clarification that God's ways and his purposes are supreme over what we think his ways and his purposes should be. It's for all of us to understand this morning that God is not late in our lives because he is not conformed to our timelines. We must remain patient. The definition for the word patience is this: the capacity to accept or tolerate delay. Ouch. The capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. Who is really good at that? You're honest. I love it. Either that or you're sleeping. Wake up. The capacity to accept delay. It is very hard. In a world that's moving as fast as ours, where instant gratification comes at a higher speed, greater expectation, and with far more options than we've ever had before, we find it more and more difficult to delay things in our life. Ask yourself that question: can you accept delay? There are many of us that if we were answering that question honestly would say no. To most things, I can't delay. I cannot wait. I want it and I want it now. Who's seen Willy Wonka? I want the golden goose now, Daddy. I want it now, Daddy. We just can't wait. We want it instantly. Do you know how long it takes a pineapple to grow from a seed? This is mind-blowing to me. From a seed will need to germinate for 6 months before it sprouts. Then it can take 2 to 3 years for it to bear its first fruits. Anywhere from 2.5 years to 3.5 years for a pineapple from a seed to a fruit. Wheat takes 7 to 8 months from planting to harvest. It's planted in the fall, it grows in the winter, and it's harvested in spring or in early summer. And what we learn from when we look at sowing and reaping, planting and harvesting, is that the harvest is never when the seed is planted. It's never when the seed is planted. It takes time. There's a delay. A farmer has a great anticipation for his harvest when he plants the seed for his crop. He knows there will be a harvest coming. An experienced farmer never plants the seed and stares at the ground and goes, all right, let's go. He understands there is a delay between planting and harvesting. And we must understand that delay requires patience. Remember this, that there is a natural delay between planting and harvest. If you take this phrase, this one-liner, and you carry it throughout your life, but just try the next few days, that there is a delay between planting and harvesting, it will help in your patience. It'll help with your patience with your loved ones. It'll help with your patience when it feels like God's not answering your request. When a seed is planted in the ground, when a farmer plants the seed, there's a lot of unknowns that take place. You don't know if there's going to be bad weather during that season. You don't know if there's going to be bugs, disease happening, flood, drought. You don't know. There's so many unknowns when you plant that seed in the ground. There's so many unknowns when we bring our request to God. We know there will be a harvest. We know there will be an answer to the request, but we don't know the process. We don't know if we will experience drought, quiet, silence. We're not sure. So when those unknown factors are taking place during the delay process, understand and remember that the harvest will come. It has to run its course, and the growing process requires time. In this fast-paced culture we live in, we want immediate results for our prayers and our requests to God. And when they don't happen in the time that we want or the way we think they should happen, we lose that patience with God. And that loss of patience fosters doubt. When we lose patience that God is late, He is not on time, we begin to doubt, is God even hearing me? Does God even know that I exist? We lose hope. Have you ever waited so long for something that you just thought it wasn't going to happen? Anybody? Have you ever waited for something so long you thought it wasn't going to happen? Just my wife and I? That's it? And you guys need to teach us. Listen, when Pastor Andy, Dan, and I were talking about this series, I saw week 2, when God seems late, and I knew, hey, that's right up my alley. When God seems late. Those of you that know us know that we've been going through this home process for about 17 months. It's gone so long that I have to count it in baby time. It's 17 months old today, is our process, 17 months old. That's how long it's been. These delay after delay after delay, these things that come up during this waiting time just creates more and more delay. We thought the home's on the land, we're good to go. Let's move in. You need your water and your electric hooked up. Awesome. It's going to take us like 3 weeks to figure out where the easement is for your water. All right, cool. That's kind of a bummer, but all right, let's do it. Hey, your electric pole looks a little old. We're going to have to replace the whole thing for you. And if it's TEP, it could take 3 to 6 months. If it's Trico, how long? We don't know. We still don't know. In this process, my wife and I have learned so much patience and not being patient. We've learned so much how much we need to let go of what we can try to control and just allow God to do His thing. This is a process. There's a delay in the process, but we know there's a harvest coming for our home. It'll be there. And it's allowed us to be patient. We've become confident in that patience. We should all have this hope. We should all be secure in our hope, knowing that God has a bigger plan in place and it supersedes our own understanding. Most oftentimes, God works on us before He works on the solution, and we must be patient in the process. We must be patient in the process. We must be like that farmer that trusts the process that the harvest will come. And there are many examples in the Bible that we have that show us of when God seems late, but that there's a process unfolding. In John's Gospel, in chapter 11, it's a powerful story of 2 sisters. It's Mary and Martha and their brother Lazarus. If you didn't grow up in church, you wouldn't necessarily know that Mary and Martha, these sisters were really, really close to Jesus. They were besties. Jesus was best friends with Lazarus. They were great friends, and I'll show you that in a passage that we're going to read pretty soon. In fact, in Luke's gospel, there's a story about Jesus coming over to their house for dinner. Like, they ate some meatloaf together and, talked about stuff. I mean, it got very intimate, their friendship. They were close. So when their brother Lazarus got sick, they totally expected that God would heal Lazarus. That they expected that Jesus would just do for his friend what he's been doing for everybody, healing people, right? He's been healing strangers. Our brother, his friend is sick. Of course he's going to heal him, right? It's Jesus. We just have closer access to him. But what happens when God doesn't always make sense? What happens? John 11, 1 through 37. That's right, I said 1 through 37. If you haven't read the Bible in a while, I'm making up for that this morning, okay? So you're welcome. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters went to Jesus saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. Notice how intimate that is. He whom you love. They didn't even call him by his name. They just said, hey, the guy that you love, he's sick. And Jesus knew who they were talking about. They asked God to come. Jesus, will you come? Your buddy is not feeling well. Our brother, we need you. They waited. Jesus didn't respond. He didn't just show up. He didn't just leave and go where Lazarus was, where he was ill. He waited. The Bible says that he waited 2 days. The next evening comes, but the request for Jesus is still not answered. I can't believe he's not here. I mean, what's going through their head, do you think? He'll be here. He's just a little late. Lazarus is still alive and things are okay. He's just a little late right now, but he's coming. I have faith to believe that God is coming. You see, God's delays are not necessarily God's denials. God's delays are not necessarily God's denials. In other words, just because God hasn't done it yet doesn't mean that God is not going to do it. Just because he hasn't answered your prayer for healing or salvation for that friend or protection in the way that you think he should, just know that it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. In fact, in verse 4, we read this about Jesus. But when Jesus heard it, he said, "The illness does not lead to death, for it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Jesus is acknowledging right here that Lazarus is sick. He understands that he's not doing well. But there's more to this process. Jesus reveals that there's more to this process because he said, this is so the Son of God may be glorified. There's more to it here. There's more happening. Remember, there's a natural delay between planting and harvest. Let's continue reading. Verse 5. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after all this, he said to his disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you're wanting to go there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." After saying these things, he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he's falling asleep, he will recover." Now Jesus was speaking of his death, but they thought he meant he was taking rest. Who's ever misunderstood what God was saying before, right? Not yet doesn't necessarily mean no. Sometimes we just misunderstand what God is saying in the moment. And those disciples did the same thing. So Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus has died. And for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there so that you may believe." You may believe what? The whole purpose to this process, that the Son of Man may be glorified. But let us go to him. So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Check this out. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. 4 days this is his buddy, whom he loved. The sisters whom he loved. And he had been dead for 4 days. There was a serious delay here. What was Martha and Mary thinking in this moment? It's too late now. What does it matter now? Does Jesus even care? Verse 18. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." In other words, God, you're late. You're late. You didn't come when you were supposed to, when we thought we needed you. You wouldn't have died if you were here. You're late. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give to you. Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." Do you believe this? There's something happening. That seed that was planted, there's something happening. When Jesus said there's more to this process so that the Son of Man may be glorified, we're seeing something happening. He's asking a question. Do you believe this? Is your faith where it needs to be? Do you believe this? She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world." When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was at the place where Martha had met him. And when the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to go to the tomb and weep there. There's something happening. There's people gathering together. We're going to see something amazing here. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died." It sounds kind of like Mary and Martha had been talking, right? They're saying the same thing here. Jesus is getting it from both directions. If you had been here, he wouldn't have died. Now they love Jesus. They believe that he's the Son of God, but they're still saying face to face with Jesus that you're late. You're late. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews had come to her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?" Do you remember what late equals a loss of patience, and that creates doubt? We're seeing that the delay in this process is causing doubt with the people that are around Jesus at the time. Could he not heal Lazarus? He didn't do it. This guy who healed the blind, he was too late. But we must trust that the harvest will come in its season. The end of this story is one that we see the Son of God glorified in. Lazarus was raised from the dead. He breathed life again. He walked again. And the result, the harvest, was that God was glorified through the Son of God. People saw that Jesus was the Son of God. Was it the way that Martha and Mary wanted it to happen? Shake your head, no. It wasn't the way that Mary and Martha wanted it or expected it to happen. They thought that Jesus was late. So what do you do? What do we do when we think that God is late in answering our prayers? What do we do? If Jesus was standing face to face with you and there's been a delay in something you asked, would you dare say, "Jesus, you have been late"? Think about it. What do you do when God seems late? See, our patience is in knowing that there is a natural delay between planting and harvest, and that we must remain patient in the process that God has, because his timing and his purpose are beyond our understanding. How many of you know that as a child you don't know the difference between no and not yet? Right? If you have children, you know this firsthand. They don't know the difference between no and not yet. Maybe you have high schoolers that don't know the difference between no and not yet. Everything seems to be no. When my son before dinner says, "Daddy, Pop-Tart," I say, "Not yet, after dinner." Well, you'd think that I just told him no. He can never have a Pop-Tart again. He throws the biggest fit in the world, and I just said, "Not yet." Calm down. It's going to be all right. Not yet does not mean no. We know that there's a difference between no and not yet, right? We understand that because we mature. We grow up. We see that there's a delay sometimes in things, that we don't get everything with instant gratification. We don't get everything we want right away. But that does not mean no. It means not yet. See, when the Bible tells us that he'll give you the desires of your heart, it doesn't necessarily mean that the prosperity gospel, you're going to name it and claim it like we saw in the video. Name it, claim it, my parking spot. That's not what it means. It means that we are in God's will, that we are actively in a relationship with the King of Kings, that we are seeking the face of the living God, and we are therefore in his perfect will. And whatever we ask in that perfect will, he will answer. Does he answer it immediately, all the time, most of the time, if ever? No. There's a delay in the process, but understand that that delay is because there is something greater happening. God's delay is not a no. It's a not yet. It is a season of God doing a work. And when that seed was planted, that request was made. When you're in God's will, it will grow and it will bring forth a harvest, but it does take time. Here's the amazing thing, and if you're taking notes, write this down. That if God always met your expectation, he would never have the opportunity to exceed them. If God always met your expectation, he would never have the opportunity to exceed them, because our God is a God who works in everything good and bad. Do you believe that this morning? Our God is a God who works in everything good and bad. And when we limit God to say, this is how you need to do it, this is how you need to perform your miracle, we're restricting the miraculous nature of who God is, because with God, anything is possible. That doesn't necessarily mean anything you try is possible. If you jump off a bridge, it's going to hurt. Doesn't mean you're going to fly. With God, all things is possible. Our possible means when you are in God's will, he shows up. Miraculous things do happen when we remain in the will of God. He works in everything to bring about good to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. In the waiting season, we must choose to trust in God, believing that he is always good. Do you trust that this morning? That God is always good. Even in the waiting process, God is always good. Expect a delay, but remain patient. God hears your prayer. God hears the cries of his people, and he will answer your prayer. But understand that something greater is at work than just the answer to your prayer. There is an opportunity for God to be glorified in this moment. And when that harvest comes and that prayer is answered the way God wants to answer, and in God's timing, the miraculous of God has just taken place. Remember that God is never late. Let's pray. God, we thank you.